What's up, guys, and welcome to the NFL Week 4 Player Pool Show. Going to take a look at the Arizona versus Washington game, the highest owned game on the slate, but should it be? And there is going to be a lot of options for us to pivot off some of these high owned guys with lower owned guys with huge upside that I'm actually shocked to see their ownership on this week. And I'll get into it after this. What's up, guys, and welcome to the NFL Week 4 Player Pool Show. Going to go over the DraftKings Player Pool and pick out some guys for us to build our lineups with this week, and then I'll go ahead and build a few DraftKings lineups afterwards. Make sure to hit that like button. Looking for 30 likes to trigger a shorter video later on, and make sure to subscribe to the channel. I'm at about 940 at this point, looking for 1,000, so I only need 60 more to get there. Was hoping to get there by the end of Week 4, so I appreciate any help getting there. And we have a lot of good games this week. The big game is going to be Washington versus Arizona. It looks like that's going to have the highest ownership concentration on it this week. And there are some games that are also interesting. That's not necessarily a game to fade, but we can get different with some of the highly owned guys, and we'll dig into it right now. First game I'm looking at here is Atlanta versus New Orleans, and not a whole lot to like in this game. The Eagles were able to get to Derek Carr last week, put a bunch of pressure on him, and he crumbled like he normally does under pressure. But the concerns are that they lost their center, McCoy, early in that game, and they're not going to have him back for this one. So they're going to be struggling in their O-line, and they're not going to be able to get that type of protection that they had the first couple weeks. So I really don't like this game too much for like both defenses are pretty good. I don't see a lot of good matchups that I like in this one. One that I do see, though, that has potential is Darnell Mooney. If you look at Darnell Mooney, he's been getting a decent amount of the targets lately with Kirk Cousins at the quarterback position. He got 8 last week and 7 the week before that. But he's been pretty consistent the last couple weeks, and I would expect Lattimore to be on Drake London, which will leave Darnell Mooney mostly on the secondary cornerbacks. So Darnell Mooney would be interesting this week. The total on this game that I have is 42.5. So it's not a high total. So if you wanted to go there, Darnell Mooney would be the only interesting guy that I really see. He's at 4,400, gives us a little bit salary relief. So I think we can kind of skip over this game and go to the next one. Cincinnati at Carolina is an interesting game to me this week. This is Andy Dalton in a revenge game against Cincinnati. And Andy Dalton has done great when he's been the starter for Carolina so far this year. Last year, we highlighted the Carolina versus Raiders game. Unfortunately, we didn't get the Raiders pushing back on the other side, but as projected, Andy Dalton ended up having a really good game in Deontay Johnson. So we were on that game. Just didn't get the shootout that we wanted on the Raiders side. But this week, Carolina faces the Cincinnati Bengals. They're playing in Carolina, which is good for offensive output for Andy Dalton and the Panthers. And I think that Cincinnati is a team with their backs against the wall. They got a losing record heading into this week, and they are going to want to, use this as a get-right spot, and they're going to need to get it right with Higgins and Chase. Higgins missed a good portion of the preseason with a hamstring injury, and he came back last week. Chase, on the other hand, was a holdout for a lot of the for all the preseason, basically. And, he really was rusty the first few weeks, but he had a breakout week last week, which is why I'm surprised to see him at only 10% ownership. I would expect Chase to be much higher owned coming off a performance where he scored 33 DraftKings points, but he's also got another great matchup this week because Carolina is giving up 26.2 DraftKings points a game to wideouts. That's good for both Higgins and Chase. And if Dalton is able to put up an offense on the other side against Cincinnati's defense, which has also been pretty sluggish this year, then I think that we can get a decent performance out of Chase this week. So I like Chase a lot this week. He's only 7,700 on top of that. So 7,700 is, it's still up there as one of the top priced guys, but it's low relative to where we normally see Chase at. So I'm just going to take a drink real quick. Sorry about my throat, guys. I got a sore throat. All right, so let's move on to the next guy. Deontay Johnson. I like Deontay in this matchup too. Cincinnati's given up only 20.1 DraftKings points a game to wideouts, but Deontay's basically, after they lost Thielen, he's the main target again this week, but he'll be even more volume probably with Thielen out. The problem is that a lot of the attention will be on Deontay this week as well. And in that situation, we may want to pivot off of Deontay this week because there's just going to be too much ownership and too much attention on him. But the volume should be there. And he showed that he was Dalton's most reliable weapon last week. And he had his biggest game of his career last week as far as yardage, at least. He had 122 receiving yards last week, and he added a touchdown and 8 receptions on top of that for that big performance. So I like Deontay this week, but I think that if you wanted to pivot, I might look at Leggett. Leggett was the guy who benefited the most with Thielen off the field, and he's their first-round rookie that, the Panthers, I think he was first or second-round rookie, early second round or late first-round rookie that, was going to be highly used by the Panthers this year. And last week, he finally got an opportunity to kind of show off some of his talent with a competent quarterback. 42 yards last week off of 3 targets. But this week, with Thielen out, expect him to be used a lot heavier. Only thing I don't like how his price jumped to 4,800. I'd like to see him in the 3K range. It really is not warranted to have a salary that high. He did have 7 targets in week 1, though. So they do target him in this offense. So Leggett might be a good pivot off of Deontay and give us some salary relief at the same time. The other guy is Mingo. Mingo last week had 4 targets. He had 5 targets in week 1. So he's a guy that's been targeted too. And again, with the competent quarterback, Mingo is, not a bad guy to pivot off of either. Let's see if I can get an idea. Like Mingo aligns mostly to the left side of the field. He has a good matchup. Deontay has a good matchup. And Leggett should have a good matchup too. I think they'll use him more in the slot. If I had to guess, I think that's where he was coming in last week. But I'll double check that real quick because I want to make sure that I'm not giving out bad information here. Let's see. Regular role on 3 receiver sets after the Panthers placed Adam Thielen on injured reserve. Mingo played 49 of the team's 74 offensive snaps and logged 3 on 4 targets. While Thielen left the game in the second quarter with a hamstring injury, Mingo didn't benefit from the major spike in playing time in the second half, as rookie Xavier Leggett was instead the preferred number 2 wideout alongside Deontay. So Leggett is the guy that we want to think of as our pivot in this game, as a potential guy to target while Deontay is getting extra attention from the Cincinnati defense. So Leggett at 4,800 too. Like I said, gives us the discount from Deontay, but he's a little bit pricey for his what he's done so far. But he's also going to have a decent opportunity with a good quarterback this week. So keep him in mind. Higgins in his first week back, 6 targets last week. Didn't do too much with him, 6.9 yards, but he was targeted a couple times in the end zone and or at least had a couple opportunities to score touchdowns. So Higgins, like he's a good guy. If we want to do these Cincinnati double stacks, I tend to lean on more Chase. But if you wanted to do a Higgins Chase double stack, Higgins is not, his price isn't bad at 5,900. And if this game ends up being a shootout, this game could be, like a potential pivot off of the Arizona game to give us a cheaper game to focus on, and then put some of those pieces from the Arizona game in with, with this as a main stack. But Cincinnati, Carolina is a game that I think is going to be a good one to focus in on. As far as running backs, looks like Cincinnati, Carolina's given up 27.5 DraftKings points a game to the running back position. So that puts Moss in a good spot. You'll probably have the ownership. Let's check his ownership. Give you guys an idea of what Moss's projected ownership is going to be this week as well. All right, so in this matchup, you'd think that he would be, like pretty highly owned. But I am seeing him at 11.4 percent ownership, which like isn't bad. Like if you want to target him, he's got Chase Brown in that backfield as well. But Zach Moss and Chase Brown both have a really good matchup. If you want to kind of try to figure out which guy to target, 20.7 DraftKings points last week against Washington in another similar matchup. So, Zach Moss is a guy to keep in the player pool. Hubbard, another guy to keep in our player pool, but he's going to be highly owned this week. Check and see what his ownership is. I think he's one of the higher owned guys. Yeah, he's the top 5 ownership this week. So you want to be cautious with Hubbard. He's at 5,700. That's a decent price for the volume that he gets. He's got a competent quarterback. The matchup's not great. Cincinnati is more middling against running backs. I think there's a lot pivots that we can go to this week over Hubbard to avoid the ownership. Dalton in the passing game would be like a good pivot off of Hubbard's ownership, but Deontay is pretty high owned. But if you think that if you prefer Deontay over Hubbard, I would probably try to stack him with Dalton if you want to get a little bit different. Dalton is 5,300 this week, very cheap for a quarterback. And we saw what he did last week, 27.56 DraftKings points. Quarterbacks haven't been racking up a bunch of points this year. It could be, just slow start coming off the rust. But yeah, quarterbacks in general have not been great to start off the season. Andy Dalton, I don't know how much work he got in the preseason, but I would imagine, as the backup, he probably got more work than a lot of starters out there. So Dalton, coming in, like less rusty than some of these other quarterbacks. But I like Dalton this week against the Bengals. Bengals have given up 17.8 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position, which is a decent score. Burrow too. I think I mentioned Burrow already, but I do like Burrow. I like Burrow stacks this week. The double stacks I think are good against Carolina this week. All right, Rams versus Chicago. Not a lot of interest in this game, but the Rams defense is dead, basically. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity for the receivers in this game. DJ Moore, Odunze had like an injury. He had a hip injury designation earlier in the week, but it looks like he no longer has that concern. But he broke out last week, 26.4 DraftKings points off 11 targets. As far as the matchup is really good for Chicago this week. Chicago's got a good defense, though. So they're probably going to limit a decimated Rams team. Rams have been like just killed this week, or this season with losing Cooper Cup and Puka. So they are just like on their last legs. Last week we saw Kyron Williams take up the majority of the workload. It's a good matchup for him again. Chicago's given up 24.8 DraftKings points a game to the running back position. Rams are giving up 24.9 DraftKings points a game to the running back position, but this run offense for Chicago has just been awful, and I don't see any any relief to that anytime soon. So I'd take the matchup against wideouts for the Rams. The Rams are giving up 31.5 DraftKings points a game to wideouts, and that's why I like DJ Moore and Odunze a little bit better. Both of them should be, pretty good options this week. And the tight end in Kmet has a decent matchup. I think Keenan Allen is he's questionable this week, so we got to keep an eye on his status. His status will impact Cole Kmet the most, but it'd probably impact Odunze a little bit too. But like Odunze and DJ Moore are options for this week. That's about all I like out of this game. Kyron Williams, also an option, but he is 7,300. He'd probably be a little bit highly owned, and he's just playing a defense that, like, basically he's the only weapon for them to focus on. So I don't like that about his matchup, even though it's a good matchup on paper. All right, let's go to Minnesota Green Bay. I like this game too. Looking at a situation here start with running back with Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones against these Vikings. Against these Packers. First of all, it's a revenge game. Very familiar with the team, but the Vikings are giving up, or the Packers are giving up. Let's see, 23.3 DraftKings points a game to the running back position. I like the price point on him at 6,400. It gives us a good pivot off of guys like Jordan Mason and Chuba Hubbard, guys like that who are projected for higher ownership. Aaron Jones has, under 10% ownership projection in this really good matchup for him. And last week we saw him come alive. He's had 2 really good weeks so far this season. He's getting a majority of the touches, and the passing backs do well against Green Bay as well. So there's overall a really good spot for Jones here, and especially if Love is not playing this week. We're still waiting to see if Love's going to play, but if Love plays, this game should be like a higher back and forth affair. Love did pretty well against Minnesota last time that they played, so he's faced this defense. He has familiarity there. Try and see if I have that called up. All right, I'm going to share the last game that they played. It was Nick Mullins at the quarterback that week. We got Sam Darnold this week. Love threw for 256 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also rushed in a touchdown. His main targets last year, this was the week that Bo Melton went off. There was some injuries to the wide receiver core. Reed ended up getting 8 targets, 6 receptions, and 2 touchdowns. So he had a big game against them. Justin Jefferson has not done well against Green Bay, just in general. If you look at Justin Jefferson's history versus Green Bay, which should also help us with Jones a little bit here. I'm not ruling Justin Jefferson as as out in this game if you want to start him, but just pay attention to how he's done against Green Bay in the past. Green Bay has a more aggressive defensive coordinator this year who plays a lot more man coverage. That's the reason why we focused on AJ Brown in week 1. So, it could be a better matchup for Justin Jefferson this week if we want to, do a little mini game stack or something like that. But 10 targets, 5 receptions, 59 yards the last time he played them. Uh, Time before that was in week 17. So he might have been like resting or not got as much playing time, but it was 5 targets, 15 yards, blah, blah, blah. If you look at the first game of 2022, 11 targets, 9 receptions, 184 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So hit or miss against Green Bay. But if he has a high ownership, let me check out and see if his ownership makes him startable. Yeah, not a huge ownership look on him. So Justin Jefferson, could be interesting this week. And take a look at him again real quick. Last week, he's come alive these past couple weeks. Sam Darnold hasn't been bad for him, and like if he's going to be less than 5% owned, and he's got this really good matchup and everything. The only thing with wide receivers scoring less points this year, $8,700 salary is a little tough to get him in, but he is definitely in the player pool this week. So keep that in mind. I like Jaden Reed the most against Minnesota this week. We saw Jaden Reed, what he did last game with Jordan Love. He scored 6 points against the Eagles. And the reason why I like him is Minnesota is allowing 18.9 DraftKings points a game to the slot position. 12.4 DraftKings points a game to the slot position. But slot receivers have done pretty well against Minnesota so far this season. Deebo Samuel had a decent game. A few other caliber slot receivers in that range too that kind of make me think that Jaden Reed could have a decent game against Minnesota this week and give us a good run back for Aaron Jones play. So keep that in mind. Skinny stacks work. If Jordan Love is playing, I don't mind doing Jordan Love stack. People might be shied away from him due to the injury concern. So Jordan Love would be interesting at maybe a discounted ownership in a game that, he's done well against Flores defense in the past. So, it could be a high scoring game in this one. Jacksonville versus Houston. I don't really like too much on the Jacksonville side. I think with the matchup that I'm looking at would be Christian Kirk with Jacksonville. Houston's giving up 13.4 DraftKings points a game to the slot position. They're also giving up 19.9 DraftKings points a game to quarterbacks. But Trevor Lawrence has not looked good this year. But Stroud has looked pretty decent. He had a down game last week. But actually, he hasn't looked that decent. He hasn't had a breakout week yet, but maybe that's coming. And let's see his history against Jacksonville. Let's see what he did last year against them. Switch over to Pro Football Reference here. All right, so against the Jags, 304 yards and 2 touchdowns, 280 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's got more weapons this year. He's got a more effective running game this year. Just everything about CJ's matchup is good. The only question is going to be if the Jaguars are able to keep up with them. The problem with Mixon is he's still hurt. We don't know if he's coming back this week, but he's coming off a high ankle sprain, which is never good for running backs. We saw what it did to running backs in the past who've tried to come off those ankle sprains, and it's never good. So Joe Mixon, I don't think I'd play him regardless. And Akers, he's dudded out a couple weeks in a row. Last week he had only 9 attempts for 21 yards, but a lot of that was game script. They were getting blown out by Minnesota. So I don't hold that too much against Cam Akers, but he's at 5,300. If you need a decent pivot, if Mixon is out this week, I think Akers burned a lot of people last week. I was not playing Akers last week, but let me check and see what his ownership is. Akers, yeah, very low ownership in this one. People got burned by him too bad last week, apparently. But he's got a cushy matchup with Jacksonville giving up 29 DraftKings points a game to the running back position. If Mixon is out, then Cam Akers is in play this week. Although Mixon did practice. Let's take a look at his exact status. Returning to a limited practice on Friday, so take that for what it is. But coming off that high ankle sprain, I don't like it at all. For wide receivers, I'd like Nico Collins in this matchup. I think everybody's going to probably like Nico Collins in this matchup, though. Let me get a look at that. Yeah, he's got a pretty high ownership this week, over 20%. So Nico Collins, he's got the best matchup probably on the Houston side. The wideouts are getting 23.5 DraftKings points a game from that Jacksonville defense, and it looks like Tank Dell is out this week. So Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs should see more volume. Stephon Diggs, Jacksonville's given up 14.4 DraftKings points a game to the slot. I would say if Mixon struggles this week, which is a long shot with that 29 DraftKings points a game that Jacksonville's given up to running backs, then you could do a Stroud to Collins and maybe Diggs stack. Maybe they try to get right after last week's game where they got blown out, a little bit embarrassed. I would not be surprised to see something like that. If Jacksonville's able to put up any type of a fight, we've heard Doug Peterson talking about making changes all week. So maybe he's going to be taking over as play caller, which would be really good for the team. But that would put Christian Kirk in play, especially with Evan Ingram, I believe, is still out. Let's see. Evan Ingram is out. See if we got any other injuries here. Gabe Davis is questionable. Yeah, there's just a lot that I like about Christian Kirk's matchup this week, given that they'll likely be playing from behind and they're playing indoors. Just a lot going on for Christian Kirk's matchup. I would expect them to target the slot position. If you've, I think it was Hilo. I heard something mentioned by Hilo. He's a DFS, like an analyst, was mentioning that the defenses against D'Amico Ryans in the past, his defense has been weakest against slot receivers. This week, this season, it has not been the case. But if you look at historical trends, that would put you more on Christian Kirk this week in that slot role. So Christian Kirk is a guy you want to keep in your player pool at 5,200 for, like the top option in that passing game. Christian Kirk is not looking bad this week. So Pittsburgh at Indy. This game is something that I'm more interested on the Pittsburgh side. Anthony Richardson hasn't really done too much, but he's got a tough matchup this week against Pittsburgh. Not really liking what I see in his matchup. Let's see. I'll give you exact numbers here. Pittsburgh has given up only 9.5 DraftKings points a game to quarterback position this year, on top of Richardson's struggles. I just don't like anything about this matchup. Pittsburgh's playing lights out defense this season. So, and on top of that, Najee Harris has a really good matchup as the running back. 26.2 DraftKings points a game is what Indy is giving up. So I would expect this to be a run-heavy game plan from Pittsburgh. But Indy has also been really bad against wideouts. So they've been giving up 24.6 DraftKings points a game to wideouts, and we've been waiting for an opportunity to use Pickens. So if we look at Pickens' matchup, he hasn't done anything since week 1, basically, where he only had 13.5 DraftKings points, but 7 targets last week, 7 targets in week 1. Pickens might be due for a breakout game in this game, given the matchup. And given the fact that they might just want to, try to get him going a bit. So don't be surprised to see George Pickens have a decent game this week. And as far as his ownership, it's projected under 10%. So Pickens gives us a nice little pivot at 5,700 off some of these guys like Deontay Johnson and stuff like that. So keep him in mind for your player pools this week. Although very low total game and volume probably won't be that great, but you can hope that he gets a couple of those deep passes, take advantage of that Indy D. Najee was the other guy I mentioned that I like with Jalen Warren is out. And Indy is a defense that we target weekly for running backs. I mentioned Swift as a pivot last week, but like that Bears run game has just been awful. But we've seen Najee. He's hit 70 yards a couple times this season. He hasn't been great either, but we know he's going to get the volume, and it's a decent matchup against this Indy D. And he's got very little competition in the backfield. So keep Najee in your player pool this week. 1 second, guys. All right. So now we got Denver versus the Jets. This is another game I don't have a whole lot of interest in. Two stout defenses going up against each other. I don't think there's really any matchups that I like too much in this game. But let me check it out here real quick. All right, so if you wanted to go with a guy, Denver's allowing 22.7 DraftKings points a game to running backs, which is a middling level. And Conklin is getting a little bit more work. Denver's been middling against tight ends as well, but those are really the only guys I'd be interested in. Conklin is at 3,600, so he's still hasn't blown up in price, but he had 14 DraftKings points last week. So Conklin is a guy that you can keep in your player pool if you get desperate at tight end position. Other than that, really not liking too much in that game. Philly versus Tampa Bay. This is going to be an interesting game because I think a lot of people are afraid of Philly's defense coming alive, but I think a lot of that was due to the injuries to the Saints offensive line last week. They smelled blood in the water and they attacked, and they did really well, slowed down Baker Mayfield. But Philly, they also prevented Derek Carr from throwing really anything effective to Rashid Shaheed and Olave. But Shaheed was the guy I was more interested in last week because I like to target the slot defense against Philly. But this week, we're talking about a much better offensive line. We got Wirfs, who's one of the best pass blocking offensive linemen in the game, and they shouldn't have the same limitations as we saw last week with the Saints. So the guy obviously to target in this situation is going to be Godwin. Godwin, as far as ownership goes, let me take a look at that. Okay, Godwin is coming in at about he's under 20%. So he's still a nice pivot for us off some of these higher owned guys, but he's got a decent ownership on him. But I really like him in this matchup. I think Baker Mayfield bounces back this week against this Philly D. As far as the Philly side, Tampa Bay is giving up 29 DraftKings points a game to running back position, and Saquon Barkley should see a ton of volume in this game. So if you wanted to do a mini stack, I don't mind that Saquon Barkley stack with Godwin. I also don't mind the Goddard stack with him, although I think Goddard will get a lot more attention on him after last week's game. As far as the tight end position, Tampa Bay's only allowed 4.3 DraftKings points a game to the tight end position. which isn't great, but we can take a look at who they've faced so far this season. All right, so they faced Washington in week 1, who has they got Ertz. Detroit, they got Laporta, and Denver, Denver's kind of, without a decent tight end. So, they faced 2 decent tight ends, and they've held tight end position to 4 DraftKings points a game. So keep that in mind with Goddard. If you want to go on the chalk and start Goddard this week, the matchup isn't great, but the volume should be there. I'd rather go with Barkley. Let me check and see what Barkley's ownership is. Yeah, Barkley, we're looking at under 20%. So that's a really good ownership clip for him. He is expensive, which explains his ownership as well. But he's been on fire this season, and I would expect him to get a decent amount of work. 36 DraftKings points in 2 out of 3 games. Expect the defense to be on him heavily. Vita Vea should be back this week, so that's going to hurt Barkley's matchup a little bit. But they should use him a lot more in the passing game this week. Let me check the passing game for Bucks have allowed the most receiving yards, most receiving DraftKings points to running backs. So they're allowing 15 points a game to the running back position as far as the passing game. So Barkley, that's perfect for Barkley, but extra attention on Barkley because him and Goddard are really the only weapons that they're going to have in this game. Evans, I don't mind either. I don't mind Evans either in this matchup just because of the Philly defense's susceptibility to wideouts. They're only giving up 15.7, which is middling range, but I think given their defensive performance so far this season, I think we want to focus on Godwin. Just keep targeting that slot. But if you wanted to play Evans, I don't mind it. But he's 7K versus Godwin, who is at 68. Well, they're both in that 7K range. But I like Godwin better in this matchup. Okay, Washington at Arizona. Guys, before I dig into this one, hit the like button. Trying to get to 30 likes, so I put out a shorter video with my favorite picks a little bit later on before lock tomorrow. And make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Looking for 1,000 subscribers before the end of week 4. I'm at about 930 something, so I need about 60 subscribers. So I definitely appreciate the help with getting to that 1,000 mark. I'm a numbers guy, so I like to hit those rounded up numbers. So Washington versus Arizona, we got like sloppy shootout. Well, not even sloppy shootout. We got competent shootout written all over this one. Both teams have been playing well. Jaden Daniels has been great, and Kyler Murray has looked pretty good for the most part. Let's check out Kyler Murray. Only 15 DraftKings points in weeks 1 and 3, but he had 28 DraftKings points against the Rams, another crappy defense. So you can expect this to be like a higher opportunity game for Kyler Murray. Jaden Daniels has been consistent, like 2 games with 28 DraftKings points and 1 with 13. New York's defense is a little bit tougher than some of these other defenses. But we got, Jaden Daniels and Kyler Murray are both in play. Both of them are elevated in price. 6,800 for Murray, 6,500 for Daniels. I think both of them will be over 15% owned this week, which isn't good for a quarterback, but it's manageable. So you don't have to be scared off this game by any means. What's interesting to me is the ownership on guys like Harrison. Because if I look at Harrison's ownership here, I see him under 15%. And Harrison is, like he's having too many opportunities to be that low owned in a high total game like this. Total on this game, we're looking at 50-point total, which is one of the higher totals. No, it's the highest total game on the slate. 3.5-point spread. I'm not buying that he's going to be under 15% owned. He is 7,500 though for his salary, so maybe that's where the restrictions are coming from. McLaurin also in a good matchup. Arizona is giving up. They're giving up 15.9 DraftKings points a game to wideouts, so not quite as good as Harrison's matchup is, but he's a guy that you can look to. As far as the best matchup on Washington's side would be the slot receivers, and last week I targeted Noah Brown as my slot guy. He didn't really deliver for me in the showdown slate, but let me check and see what his snap count was last week. Noah Brown had a 58% snap count. So as projected, it was ticking up, and Brown looked like the best receiver out there for Washington, apart from McLaurin. So Noah Brown is here at 3,800. Gives us a cheap option and a decent matchup. Looking for a pivot off this game. Maybe we see that snap share tick up even more this week. And, don't be surprised to see it closer to, 70% maybe, like with how well of a job that Noah Brown's been doing. 3 targets, each of the games that he's played with Washington. He joined them. Basically, Texans only dropped him because they had too many weapons for wide receivers, and Noah Brown was basically just the odd man out. So they went with, they picked up Diggs, they dropped Noah Brown, gave Diggs the slot role, and Washington made a really good pickup. Dan Quinn, the coach of the Commanders, used to be the coach of the defensive coordinator for the Cowboys, and Noah Brown was on the Cowboys during that period. So, Noah Brown has that connection with Dan Quinn. So, given the need for Washington to have some reliable receivers, don't be surprised to see Noah Brown get some opportunity. I also like Dortch as a sneakier play in this one. I don't think he's going to have huge ownership, but with Trey McBride out, that'll leave more opportunity for Dortch this week. Dortch had 6 targets last week and 8 targets in week 1. Hasn't done too much with it, but he's a guy that's been able to put up points with Kyler Murray in the past. And at 4,300, it doesn't hurt to take a flyer on Greg Dortch if you need salary relief. Michael Wilson is also interesting. He's at 4,200. 9 targets last week, 8 receptions for 64 yards. Had his little bit of his biggest game so far. Let's see what his ownership is. Yeah, so Michael Wilson, he's going to be like 16% owned. I don't like that. Versus Dortch. Dortch is looking at 15% owned. So all these ancillary weapons, going to be high owned. It looks like in this game. Those guys are easy guys to pivot off of. Like with some of those other ones that I mentioned. Luke McCaffrey he'd probably be a good pivot just in the same game. 3 targets last week. Expect Jaden to be throwing more in this game. I just think that he's going to be, forced to throw more. I think this is probably, Cincinnati. Well, they were throwing a lot last week because had a 38-33 outcome in that game. But they were playing with a significant lead, throughout. So, maybe we see more work out of McCaffrey this week. Let's see. I think the other guy I like in this one is Robinson. With Eckler being out, Eckler has a concussion, so he's out, and that's going to put Robinson in play this week. Robinson has, he's been doing pretty good this season. He had 10 DraftKings points last week, so that was a dud, but he had 17 and 17 in the prior weeks. But without Eckler, like Robinson is pretty good in the passing game, so he's going to get a lot more work. And I would expect Robinson to be able to put up a decent game in this high scoring matchup. He is going to have ownership though; he's over 20%. But Robinson, I don't mind in this game. And Connor, on paper, he's got a pretty good matchup. Commanders are giving up 23.5 DraftKings points a game to running back position. So that's going to set up Connor to have a decent game. Didn't do too much in that game last week. I think he was coming off of he might have gotten hurt or something like that. Let me check and see. Lowest rushing output. Yeah, he just couldn't get. Well, I mean, Detroit's got like one of the best run defenses in the league too. So Connor's in play this week in a good matchup. If you think that Arizona might be playing with a lead, I like the passing game better for Arizona, whereas I like the run game better for Washington. But that might be what everyone else is thinking as well. If we look at McLaurin, yeah, McLaurin has pretty low ownership. He's at around that 10% mark. So, yeah, McLaurin might be the pivot in this game off of Brian Robinson if you don't want to use Brian Robinson, but I do like Brian Robinson in this matchup. New England, San Francisco, nothing to really cover here. The only guys, Jordan Mason is going to get a lot of ownership. I don't necessarily like the matchup. I think at his price, he's getting too price restrictive now. He was great when he was cheap, but now he's 6,700. And we got plenty of other options in that price range with better matchups. Looking at 23.8 DraftKings points a game is what San Francisco's given up. New England's given up 22 DraftKings points a game to the running back position. So very middling there. Nothing really like jumps off the page about his matchup other than them being like the home favorites by a large amount. But, the ownership, though, on him is going to be really high, close to pushing 30%. So there's ways that you can get in different better spots. I like that Aaron Jones spot a lot better, for example. But there are other pivots this week as far as the running back position. Ramondre, I don't really like him this week against San Francisco, although San Francisco has given up 23.8 DraftKings points a game. But, I was targeting Ramondre last week because I felt like he was going to be used a lot more in the pass game. He ended up getting us 1.3 DraftKings points against the Jets. And the Jets were a better matchup against the run than the 49ers are. Than the 49ers are. So keep that in mind. We saw a breakout from Juwan Jennings. You've heard me talk about him a few times on this show. Looks like Debo will likely be back, but Kittle might still be out. So monitor the status of those guys. But 49 DraftKings points. I don't think I recommended him last week, but I definitely should have, and I don't know why I wouldn't have. But Juwan Jennings, this guy always comes through in clutch moments. They call him third and Juwan for a reason. Deebo Samuel is still questionable with that calf strain. Limited participant on Thursday. So he has a shot of coming back, but if he's out, then that puts Jennings back in play. But Jennings is expensive at 5,600. So New England has been giving up 21.3 DraftKings points a game to the slot, though. So keep that in mind. Jennings has a good matchup, but he's expensive. But he's also clutch. So keep that in mind with Jennings. Kansas City at the Chargers. Not really too interested in this game. One weakness that we've seen on Kansas City that's become a bit of a trend is the tight end position. Has a good matchup against Kansas City, and they've been allowing 22.2 DraftKings points a game to tight end. So they've been pretty good to target with tight ends. And Hayden Hurst is getting the most passing game work for tight ends on this offense, and he's at 2,800. So if you're looking for a really cheap tight end, Hayden Hurst, leave him in your player pool in this matchup. Herbert's status will be one to monitor because we're going to want Herbert to be throwing to Hurst if we're using that play. But yeah, just keep an eye on that injury report for the Chargers this week. Other than that, not sure how much interest I have in either these running games. Both defenses have been decent against the run this year. Yeah, I don't really see anything much that I like in this matchup other than what I mentioned. Cleveland at Vegas. This is another game, not a whole lot of interest in. Jacoby Myers is probably interesting with Devontae Adams being ruled out. But Jacoby, he got a decent amount of targets last week. So, Jacoby Myers would be interesting this week with Devontae out. As far as the matchup, though, Cleveland's only given up 10.7 DraftKings points a game to the slot and 16.2 to wideouts. Myers has run majority of his routes in the slot, but I would imagine they push him. Actually, no, they've been giving up 20.1 DraftKings points a game to wideouts. So Jacoby Myers, he's a guy that you can leave in your player pool this week. Let's see. Brock Bowers doesn't have a great matchup this week, but with Devontae being out, leave Bowers in your player pool. 7.4 DraftKings points a game is what Cleveland's allowing to tight ends. So keep that in mind if you're going to play Bowers. But he's 5,600, so probably up there for tight ends this week. So let's get all games in here. Before I get into a lineup build, make sure to hit the like button. Looking for 30 likes to put out a shorter video later on. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Looking for hitting that 1,000 mark. I'm about 60 shy of that 1,000 mark, so help me out there. All right, let's start things out with. Let's do this mini stack that I like here. Let's do Jones to Reed. Put that in for now. Quarterback, if we want to get a little bit different from that Arizona game, I do like how Burrow looks this week. So let's put Burrow in there and let's stack him up with Chase, who has, like his ownership. I just don't understand this week. All right, so that's going to give us 4,600 per guy. Let's go to our defense now. Carolina, no. Don't like New England. Don't like Commanders. Don't like Denver. Don't like Atlanta. Although I don't hate them if you need to go cheap. Don't like the Chargers. Don't like Jacksonville. Bucks are the first one that I see that I like. With Philly missing all their weapons, the Bucks, could do something this week. Rams versus Chicago. Don't like that. Don't like that matchup. Arizona, don't like that. Don't like the Vikings at Green Bay unless Malik's playing over Love. Philly at Tampa Bay, don't like that. Texans, I don't mind the Texans at 3K. Texans are good at 3K. Don't like Green Bay. Bears are good at 3,100. So 3,100 for the Bears, 3K for Texans. Let's put the Texans in there. All right. So next, I'm going to go with let's go with a cheap tight end on the Bengals to give us a secondary stack option. He's been getting more work. Eric All, rookie. I think he's a rookie. And 4 targets last week, 4 targets a week before. I had a close eye on Gesicki because I was recommending Gesicki last week, but then I saw this Eric All guy was getting a lot of work and he was getting talked up. Eric All could be interesting at 2,500. Let's put him in there and hope for a touchdown. We need a touchdown for this play to work out. Has he scored one yet this year? He has not scored one. But let's see the matchup again for this play here. 15.2 DraftKings points a game to the tight end position is what Carolina is giving up. So good matchup for all. Gives us a double stack with Burrow. We're running it back. Let's run it back with Deontay. We don't need to worry about being chalky there. For running back, I think my next favorite guy, I like Harris matchup, and he's cheap at 5,600. See if I can scroll down and find anyone else that's interesting lower than that. A lot of these guys are easy to scratch off. Harris, Ford, both good matchups. Hubbard, obviously. Let's put Robinson in there, though. Going to leave us with 6,100 in the flex. Now, if you wanted to, have Robinson in there and then give us a guy on Arizona to run it back with. I mean, this one you could get Higgins in there. So you'd have Higgins. If we put Higgins in there, we got rid of Johnson. Let's say that Burrow needs a double stack in order to compete with that Arizona game and those quarterbacks in the Arizona game. So let's say Burrow has a double stack here with Higgins and Chase. We got Robinson in there poaching touchdowns away from Jaden Daniels. Going to leave us with 5,800 for a receiver. I mentioned I liked Leggett. I want to get a guy in this lineup. It's going to give us a ability to flex more flexible at tight end. Trying to see if there's anyone else. That would give us that Hurst option. So Hurst in that situation at 2,900 or 2,800, let's say that Hurst ends up having a decent game. Like Hurst, this is going to be a super high risk with this lineup, but it gets us a Burrow double stack. It gets us a Jones. You know what? Let's take out the Texans. Let's put in another one of those defenses. Let's put in the Bucks. Gives us 3,800 at the tight end position. That gives us Taysom Hill, Conklin as an option. Gesicki, guys like that. But that gives you an idea of a direction you could go. We can easily take out Higgins and Leggett, put Deontay back in there. This is a safer way to go. Let's put in all to give us that second stacking option. I want to stack Burrow with 2 guys if I'm using them this week, just because, like I said, we need to justify him outscoring Daniels and Murray, and he's going to need to do it with probably two guys going off with him. So it leaves us with our flex position. We could get we got a lot of options here. We got Ayuk. We got Cooper in a decent matchup. London's another guy that's named like Higgins. We can still get Higgins in this matchup. I don't know why I went away from Deontay if I could still get Higgins in there. Yeah, so just get Higgins in there, and then you have a double stack with Burrow. You got Deontay as the run back. Deontay. Um, oh yeah, that Bucks D unlocked it for us. If we put Higgins in there, where's that leave us with the options for our defense? No, we still got the Bears and we still got the Texans. I don't know what the hell I did there, but yeah, we got like this one I like a lot better. We got Burrow. Uh, we got this mini stack with Jones and Reed. We got Burrow to Chase and Higgins. Oh, all that's the reason. Here, let me put in that Texans D. Let me see if I can get rid of all and go up to Hurst. All right, I'm gonna have to go back down to the Bucks to get Hurst in there. But yeah, I mean that gives you an option. Um, gives you an interesting matchup with Hurst. Um, and like leaves that spot open for us. So, that's one way you could go, like to get a little bit different. Let's build with that Arizona lineup. Let's see what we can do there. All right, let's start out with let's go with Jaden Daniels. We don't necessarily need to stack him with any of his receivers. I don't mind stacking him with Brian Robinson in this game because Brian Robinson will be more involved in the pass game. We saw Eckler get a receiving touchdown just last week, I think. Where's Eckler been at? And Robinson's a decent receiver. Eckler got a receiving touchdown last week against Cincy. Let's see. For receiver, let's just go with Harrison, see where that leaves us. Harris was the cheapest running back that I saw that I liked. All right, at least this is 4,800 per guy. Let's go ahead and get our defense in. Let's go with the Texans to start off and play with it from there. So receivers, I like Chase a lot this week, but I don't know if we can get him in. 4,400. Tight end. Maybe put in Ertz. Although I don't want to I don't like how the weapons have been doing with Jaden Daniels. Although I don't hate Noah Brown. And that's a 3,800. That gives us a little bit of salary relief. Where if we wanted to at this point, we could go for a guy like Goddard in the tight end. Leaves us with 4,700 in the flex. Now, Noah Brown is going to be our differentiation in this lineup. Because this is a chalk. I think Harris is pretty chalky. Jalen Warren's out. At least he should be. Harrison is going to be chalky. Chase is less chalky than he should be. Noah Brown will have no ownership. Goddard will be chalky, and Texans D, I don't know what to expect out of them. If we wanted to, though, let's switch over to that Bucks D, and that would set us up with Leggett. You got options like Leggett. You got Watson. Jahan Dotson, if you think he's going to get any work in Philly. Quentin Johnson's been pretty good so far. Don't like his matchup necessarily. Leggett, though. Leggett would be the guy that I'd want, like, just to run it back. Make sure you put in, like, Harrison in that flex if you go with Leggett. So you have an afternoon guy in that flex spot. Then as we go down, Uh, Pop Douglas doesn't have a bad matchup this week. Where's Reed at? Reed's at 6K, so we're $1,000 off Jaden Reed this week with this direction. But I mean, this gives you plenty of options for the flex. Good way to build with that Arizona game. We're running it back with Harrison, and we got Robinson, Daniels, and Brown in there. They all have the best matchups on Washington's side. Brown ticked up to 68%. What was it? 58%. 58% snap count last week. So Arizona's given up 15.4 DraftKings points a game to the slot position. You know, if Arizona puts this game ahead, then Noah Brown, we should see get a decent amount of targets because they're going to be wanting to hit that reliable guy in that situation. So, you know, that gives you a couple options. I'm going to call it quits after that. My throat is dying on me, as you guys can tell. But tomorrow, make sure to hit that 30 likes so I can trigger that shorter video for tomorrow. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. I always forget to mention this at the top of the show where I should. But subscribe or open up an underdog account, deposit. They're going to match you 50% on a deposit up to $1,000. So if you deposit $2,000, they're going to match you up to 50% on that and hit you with $1,000 deposit bonus, which is, you know, ridiculous. And that's going to set us up for playoff best ball. You're going to want to subscribe to the channel just for that. And yeah, so make sure to open up that underdog account, hit that like, hit that subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.